Hello, and welcome to this review of the Daylight Company Lumi D35500 desk lamp. This review is focusing on the usefulness of this lamp for miniature painting, but the points we'll cover should apply to any desktop hobby activity where good lighting is required. This lamp retails at £109.99, but if you shop around, it can be picked up for about £90 including postage, and that's how much I paid for it. The lamp has a wide shade, 3-point adjustment system, and comes with a generously sized desk lamp. The LEDs in this lamp are reported to last 50,000 hours. This equates to about 17 years if you run the lamp 8 hours a day, every day. I'm going to be honest here, I've got no idea how realistic this rating is. It sounds really impressive, and even if it's way off, it suggests that this lamp will last for ages. This review will focus on the real-world usability and performance of this lamp for desktop hobby. Now, the Daylight Company referred to this lamp as a professional workstation lamp that enables you to see fine details and true colours. So it should be more than adequate for our use. Now, I won't be cracking out a spectrometer or undertaking any scientific measurement of the lamp output, colour temperature or colour rendering, but we do need to discuss these specifications briefly as they are key features of any work lamp. Now, colour temperature is measured in kelvins. Normal household bulbs are usually about 3000 kelvins. They're often referred to as a warm white, feeling quite yellowy. In relation to real daylight, they're kind of like an early morning or a late evening light. They provide a homely, relaxing, warm light. Lovely to sit under, maybe not so good for painting under. A daylight white bulb will be around 5000 Kelvin, attempting to replicate direct sunlight at noon. Most lamps and bulbs marketed as daylight will be about 6000 to 6500 Kelvin, slightly into the blue range. Somewhere between 5000 and 6500 Kelvin is generally considered the best colour temperature for fine detail and colour critical work, depending on the specific work required. The Daylight Lumi D35500 lamp sits right in this spot, very slightly into the blue side of white with a colour temperature of 6000 Kelvin. So you probably heard about colour temperature. You might not have heard of colour rendering index or CRI. This is different, but it is linked to the colour temperature. CRI is a number that measures how faithfully a light source can reveal the colour of objects that the light source illuminates. That sounds really important, right? It's all about colour. That's what we're doing with our paint. So what is a good rating? A CRI rating of 70 to 80 is considered good, and above 90 is considered excellent. Now, although this CRI value is often quoted by lamp manufacturers, don't get too hung up on it. I mentioned that it's not the same thing as colour temperature, but it is linked to it, and that it measures how faithfully a light source can reveal the colour of objects that light source illuminates. Well, what it actually measures is how faithfully a light source can reveal the colour of objects that the light source illuminates in comparison to a theoretically ideal example of a light source of the same colour temperature. And what is thought to be an ideal comparison is different for lights with a colour temperature above 5000 Kelvin. Now, for us non-physicist hobbyists looking to buy a good lamp, we really just need to know that the CRI isn't the only metric to consider, even though it sounds really, really important. And if we are comparing the CRI of different lamps, they need to be of a similar colour temperature for the comparison that we're making to be useful. A real-world example of the limitations of just looking at CRI value can be seen when you consider that light from an incandescent lamp with a rating of 100 on the CRI scale is still going to feel warm and, in my opinion, not ideal for our purposes. An incandescent lamp is basically the lights that we used to have in our houses before we all switched over to energy savers, the ones that basically heat up to provide the light. Imagine you're sitting there under the incandescent light bulb. You're safe in the knowledge it's revealing colours as well as any other incandescent light source with that same colour temperature anywhere in the known universe. But it will probably still feel yellowy and not as nice as a basic daylight coloured lamp for the kind of things that we would want to be doing, painting or other hobby like embroidery, anything else really. So although the CRI metric may not be quite as fundamental in deciding if a lamp will be good for our purposes as it first seemed, it is still worth stating the reported CRI rating of this lamp for comparison against other lamps of a similar colour temperature. So the Daylight Lumi has a claimed rating of 80 plus on the colour rendering index. This is a bit vague. It does tell us that it's probably between 80 and 85, because I'm sure they would have said if it was over 85, especially if it was 90 or above. So 80 plus, not bad for an LED lamp. And when it comes to brightness, we'd be looking for lumen or lux ratings. I'm going to be honest, I've found in the past different manufacturers' claims about light output to be way off to real world experiences. I found this in lamps, torches, and other light sources. So I'm just going to note here that the Lumi has two brightness settings, and they are stepped settings. The Lumi does not have a variable dimmer. You either set it on the bright setting, the less bright setting, or you turn it off. One other variable not mentioned in the specs, but one that we'll definitely need to consider, is the diffusion of the light emitted by the lamp. I'm going to say it now that I personally feel that for our hobby purposes, this is at least as important as any of the other metrics that we've discussed so far. The more diffused the light is, i.e. the more spread out it is, the softer it feels, the less glare it produces, and the shadows that it produces will appear less harsh. This is another reason why the output, the brightness that is, isn't as important as you might first think. You can have a bright light that's well diffused, and you can have an equally bright light that isn't. They will be very different. For any review to be useful, you need to know what bias exists in the person or the organization that is completing the review. So first up, I bought this lamp with my own money. I've got no affiliation with the manufacturer or the supplier. But you do need to know that I have some previous experience and some expectations that will affect my views and the ratings that I'll give on this lamp. In terms of my previous experience, I've used normal household lights to paint under for many years, but by and large I've painted during the daytime, and that's mainly because of not having a good lamp and generally finding it very hard to paint under basic household lights and lamps at night or in poor daylight. I've also used 30 watt 6500 Kelvin daylight bulbs that I put in floor standing lamps, just some basic floor standing lamps from IKEA, but with no diffusion. These were very bright, nice colour temperature in my opinion, but quite harsh. Now, I could have made some diffusers to go in front of those, just using something like tracing paper or baking paper, but I haven't ever done that. And what I have also used though is a pair of 135 watt 5500 Kelvin bulbs in some basic studio lamps that have a soft screen for diffusion. The soft screen is basically an umbrella that sits in front of the lamp, it's translucent and diffuses the light. I've actually been using these studio lamps alongside the Lumi recently when doing some filming for some upcoming painting videos, and I'll mention that in the review as we go along. The studio lights that I'm talking about can be picked up for around about £50 for a pair, so they're quite a bit cheaper than the Lumi. And chucking in a decent daylight bulb into an IKEA lamp, you can get a pair of those for around about £30 to £40, something like that. So a little bit cheaper again. So you know that I'm reviewing this Lumi having already tried out some of those usual things that us hobbyists will try out in order to improve our workspace lighting. So let's have a look at the criteria against which I will review the daylight Lumi. Is the lamp well built? Is it easy to use? Is it easily positionable? Is the lamp bright enough? Does it reveal colours well? How soft are the shadows that it casts? And based on the functionality and performance, is it good value for the money that I spent on it? In addition to my previous experience, I also have some expectations of this lamp that are going to affect my review and the ratings that I give. So I'm going to tell you what these are now so that you can consider my review in comparison to your own situation and your own expectations or requirements out of the lamp. I want this lamp to save space over using the multiple floor or desk lamps that I have been using, in particular the lamps that require softboxes or soft screens, as these do take up a lot of space. I also want it to be easily positionable. As an absolute minimum, this lamp has to be at least as good as using a daylight bulb in a normal lamp when it comes to illuminated colours faithfully, and it has to be at least as well diffused. In terms of value for money, you need to know that £100 is quite a lot of money for me to spend on a lamp. If you're in the miniature painting hobby like me, especially something like Warhammer, you'll be used to spending a fair amount of money, but I'm considering this lamp a not insignificant luxury purchase to improve my painting workstation. So I'm therefore expecting it to be pretty good in terms of functionality and performance in order to consider it good value for money. So let's jump in and start by having a look at the general functionality. I've had this lamp clamped here for 2 months and it's rock solid. The clamp would easily work on a desk or shelf up to at least 2 inches thick. You can see that the lamp can be moved up and down while keeping the wide head parallel with the desk. It also moves laterally on the clamp pivot if needed, useful for storage. It stays where you leave it, and I've noticed zero slippage. It stays in place very well. and the range of movement is good. One movement I would like to have seen is the head being able to spin horizontally, so rather than facing my paint rack, it could face forward. The reason I would like this is that I could then maybe attach it to the shelf or attach it to the desk in a way whereby once positioned, the lamp head would sit a little further back from the front of the desk while still remaining parallel to the front of the desk. Currently, it can't quite do that. The lamp has a generous length of power cable, transformer built into it. I have no issue with keeping this out of the way under the desk. General build quality of the lamp is good. The activation switch, when you turn it on and off, works well, and the lamp in general overall feels to be of good quality in my opinion. To review the light quality and lamp performance, I've recorded a couple of tests showing the lamp in use. Now, quick caveat here, I filmed this using a decent-ish camera where I can control the exposure manually, but you're kind of going to have to trust my descriptions of the brightness, the color temperature and color rendering to a large degree, as it's pretty hard to capture all this on video. This clip is filmed in the evening with a little light coming in from the window to the left of the shot. It would not have been possible to paint easily under this level of natural light. Now to start with, the Lumi is on the brightest setting. I've quite happily painted under the Lumi at night, and if anything I found I needed to raise the head quite high for it to be comfortable brightness on this high setting. I'd expect there to be some shadow cast from a lamp from directly above, and this can be seen on the underside of the snow troll. However, you can also see that shadow cast is quite soft, showing good diffusion from an overhead light. I'm going to flick on the soft screen studio lamps now, firstly on the right, and now on the left. You can see the additional illumination to the sides of the light cast by the Lumi. These soft screen studio lamps are pointing toward the model horizontally. It doesn't show well in the video, but they illuminate the model more from the side, slightly reducing the shadow cast from the overhead Lumi. Now, purely in terms of quality of light and comfortable painting conditions, I find the combination of the two soft screen lamps from 45 degrees and the Lumi from above to be the best all-round illumination I can get from the various different lights that I have available in this room. However, the additional step up in terms of both the brightness and the general quality of the illumination that we get by adding the soft screens to the light cast by the Lumi is actually very small in comparison to the large step up in quality we see going from a normal household light to the Lumi, i.e. these additional lights that I'm adding at the sides only add a small amount of additional quality. This is quite apparent if we re-watch the segment where I switch on the additional soft screen lamps. Bear in mind that these are 135 watt, 5500 kelvins fluorescent energy saving bulbs. They're not some really basic low brightness bulbs. This shows that the illumination of the workspace from the daylight Lumi on its own was already pretty significant. Final note on the general light quality is, if we look at this good looking guy at the back here who doesn't sit right under the Lumi, he's a bit further back. The shadows are actually less pronounced. I think this really is just a simple case that he is not directly under the lamp. This is another reason why I wish that the Lumi could be moved further back towards my painting shelf while keeping the head parallel to the front of the desk. Let's have a look now at the difference in light color temperature, brightness and diffusion between a normal household room light, a cheap warmer LED strip light and the Lumi. I'm going to be switching between the different lights, and you'll also see me readjusting the camera on the fly due to the significant difference in exposure created by the contrast and brightnesses of these lights. I'll talk through what you're seeing here. For reference, this was shot on a late afternoon with some natural light still present. So starting off, we have our snow troll buddy illuminated by the household light. This is what we're all pretty used to, right? It's dark outside, maybe winter, there's no daylight, and the household lights are very warm. The temperature of those household lights is nowhere near as bad as the horrible harshness of the light. The lack of diffusion is very apparent in that crisp shadow. Guarantee that if you try and paint models quickly under this light, the next time you check them in daylight, you'll find spots you thought were painted that aren't, bits you've painted on by mistake and didn't realise, and possibly, but not as likely as obvious, the colours don't look as right. They don't look the same as when you painted them under the orangey yellow light. And most of these issues with the household light are caused by a combination of the lack of brightness, in particular a lack of good diffuse bright light, rather than the colour temperature on its own being an issue. Okay, so now I've switched on the warm LED strip light that is located underneath my shelf above the paint rack. Basic job, quite cheap, only about £20. Now, if this light wasn't as warm a colour as it is, I'd say a couple of these would actually be a really great hobby light setup. You can see straight away that the level of diffusion is way better as soon as there's this multi-directional light source. I'm turning the undershelf and the room light off now and switching just the Lumi on. It comes on its brightest setting first, by the way. it is very bright in comparison, so I need to adjust the camera to regain the correct exposure here. The Lumi color temperature is significantly more towards the white and the blue, slightly blue, than the yellow of the room light. It isn't picked up in the video as well as in real life, but the overall illumination just feels a lot better. It's hard to explain in words, but everything on the desk looks more clear. The shadow harshness is also way better than the room light, and it is also better than the cheap LED undershelf light, but to a lesser degree. Now switching the Lumi onto the lower setting, then off and back onto high. Just using a paintbrush here to better show the light diffusion we're getting under the Lumi, there's really not a well-defined shadow. We go back to just the room light for comparison, and the huge overall brightness level difference is accentuated by the camera, which I've set to not auto-adjust for proper exposure. And just look at that shadow. Look at how I'm now blocking the light too. I'm sure we've all tried to paint in these kind of conditions where maybe the light is above us and we're really getting in the way of the light. Personally, for myself, I've got to the point where I won't do any scalp or X-Acto knife work in this kind of light anymore. I find it too risky to cut it myself. This final test is showing the diffusion with the Lumi on low. This final shot here shows the Lumi on lower brightness setting. There's some good daylight coming in from the window on the left-hand side, and we also have one of the studio soft screen lights on the other side. I'm really showing this as a comparison to what we've seen of the Lumi in poorer natural light scenarios a little bit earlier, where it was later in the evening. I'll often actually use the Lumi on the lower light setting during daylight hours. It really helps balance the light out coming through the window. I'm putting my thumb up here because I'm basically saying that the Lumi on low, good daylight coming through the window and one soft screen, kind of the best conditions that I can achieve with the equipment that I have. Now, this isn't a negative point for the Lumi. I'm not really saying that it needs those additional light sources, but it is definitely the case that the daylight coming in through the window and the one additional soft screen side light do definitely, in my opinion, slightly improve the working conditions underneath the Lumi. But, and here's something that I'm quite surprised by, is that in nearly all situations where I've got reasonably good daylight coming in through the window, I do still like having the Lumi on, and I find that improves the daylight coming through the window. Let's have a quick look at a real-world example of working under the Lumi. This is a video shot with some really nice light coming in from the window on the left. I've got to be honest, I can't remember if I had one additional side light on or not, but the Lumi is definitely on, and I can tell from looking at this that it's the Lumi doing most of the work in providing the lighting alongside the light coming in from outside, the natural light. And as I've already mentioned, this is probably my favourite lighting condition. Now, if you want to see some more painting videos, stay tuned to the channel. I've been painting for years and have years of unpainted models collected and waiting to be painted. This channel will be focusing in particular on strategies for turning our unpainted models into finished works and whole armies, hopefully, as well as documenting my personal struggle to just get on with getting the backlog painted. If you're watching this review because you're into a different hobby where this light might be useful, then the pain of mountains of unpainted miniatures probably won't be familiar to you. It probably doesn't make sense at all, to be honest, but trust me, it's definitely real, and most of us miniature painters do struggle with this. Okay, let's speed this up. Let's quickly recap the review criteria, my own personal biases, and then draw some conclusions about the lamp. With regards to general functionality, the lamp looks really good. Build quality is good, doesn't wobble about once fixed to the desk. The clamp's strong, I've had no problems at all with it loosening in the couple of months that I've been using the lamp. When you move the lamp into a position that you want, it stays there. The range of movement's good, the mechanism's good, basic things like the power switch and power cord are more than adequate. With regard to the things that I specifically wanted out of the lamp in terms of functionality, it definitely saves space. It's much nicer to have this desk lamp than a bunch of floor standers, and especially the lamps with big annoying soft boxes or soft screens attached. Those really do get in the way, and they are, I'm going to be honest, generally quite annoying to have hanging around in the room all the time. They're easily breakable as well. The additional light quality that they add is not worth the space that they take up. In terms of positionability, I've already said that it's very good overall, but I really would have liked it if the head would spin horizontally to add some additional positioning options. I feel this could have probably been added quite easily with some kind of ball joint. I assume it was not added purely down to cost. So this will affect my score here, as you know that I feel this lamp was quite pricey, and so I have high expectations of what should be included with a lamp at this price. 8 out of 10. It's pretty good. If it had the rotating head, I'd give it a 9 out of 10 for sure. I don't tend to give many things a solid 10 out of 10 because you basically have to be perfect and there's nearly always room for improvement. So 8 out of 10 for me is a good score. With regards to the light quality and performance, I've been impressed with the Lumi. It doesn't have a variable dimmer, but you only have to raise or lower the head to effectively achieve a brightness variation, and the maximum brightness is more than adequate in my opinion. The light temperature is noticeably a little blue, but I do like it. My subjective feeling is that everything seems very clear under the light cast by the Lumi. I find it works really well during the daytime with some natural light in it. At night time the light feels a little more blue as there's no natural light in the room, but again, I do find it quite nice to work under. The diffusion is pretty good, way better than a normal room light, and on par with a lamp with a full soft screen in front of it. I do find the light a little unnatural feeling, probably because of the way it leans towards the blue, and subjectively I can tell that some colours, especially reds, don't feel the same as they do under proper daylight conditions. But honestly, that's the same with every daylight bulb I've used. Maybe a more expensive light with a higher CRI, 95 or above, would be better, but I doubt it would be available for the same price. 9 out of 10. Even considering what I think of as quite a hefty price tag, I would say that the light quality and the general performance of the Lumi has exceeded my expectations. Value for money. I'm going to give this lamp an 8 out of 10. Functionality and light quality is very good overall, but when I consider that it's twice the price of a set of basic softbox studio lights, it's hard to give it a higher score just purely on the value. Value is even more subjective than personal judgments on light quality, and you already know my biases and expectations, so you should be able to judge the relative value from your own perspective based on your own views of spending £90 on a lamp like this. All I'll say is that I definitely do not regret buying the Daylight Lumi lamp, and it has definitely improved the lighting at my desk. I hope this review has been useful in some way to you. Please let me know if you liked it, or if you have suggestions on how a review like this can be improved. I'll probably review some other hobby-related equipment if there's an interest for it, so it'd be good to know what you think. In particular, if you have experience with this lamp over a longer period of time, or you can comment on similar lamps, that would be really interesting to hear. Thanks very much.